The silence out here is the worst kind. The kind that rings in your ears louder than any shelling ever could. It's the night before the push, and we're all just waiting, trying to be quiet, trying not to think. But that's all there is to do out here in this God-forsaken mud. I found a cemetery corner of the trench, over by the ammo crate where the sandbags are mostly intact, and I'm using an empty ration box as a desk. The flicker from this stub of a candle is throwing crazy shadows against the dirt wall, making the whole world feel like it's shaking even when it's still. My hands won't stop trembling, and it's not from the cold, though God knows it's cold enough to freeze the marrow in your bones. It's just everything. This might be the last quiet I ever get, and the weight of that is crushing me. I've got this one precious sheet of paper, a bit damp at the corner, and my fountain pen that's almost out of ink. I told myself I'd write a proper letter home, something they could keep, something that sounded brave. But now that I'm here, the words just won't come. How do you sum up a whole life, all the things you meant to say, all the regrets that chew at you in the dark, on one piece of paper? How do you tell the people you love most in the world that you're probably not coming back, without shattering them the way this place has shattered you? The smell is what gets me first, always. It's a mix of wet wool, cold mud, cordite, and something else, something sour and metallic that's just death. You get used to it, or you think you do, but then a wind shift brings it fresh and it hits you all over again. My buddy Klaus, 2 foxholes down, he's humming some folk song under his breath, the one his girl likes. It's barely a whisper, but in this silence it carries. It's his way of praying, I think. Me, I'm trying to write. I start with Lieb Muddy, Lieber Vati. Just seeing those words makes my throat tight. I can see our kitchen so clearly, the smell of fresh bread, Mutty's apron, Vati reading the paper by the stove. It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to some other boy. That boy didn't know what cold really was. He didn't know the taste of fear, a coppery tang on your tongue that never really goes away. He took so much for granted. The simple warmth of a bed, a hot meal, a day without the constant, grinding noise of war in the distance. So I write about that. I thank them for that childhood, for all those quiet, ordinary days that seemed so boring then but now feel like paradise. I tell them I'm sorry for all the times I complained, for not appreciating the peace they gave me. It feels so inadequate, like trying to hold back the ocean with a teacup, but I have to say it. Then I have to write to my little sister, Liesel. God, she's only 14. In my head, she's still this little thing with braids and scraped knees, chasing after me in the garden. Her birthday is next month. I promised her I'd be home for it. I promised her a real present from France, something fancy. I write that promise down again now. I will be there for your birthday, I swear it. But the words look like a lie on the page. My hand shakes so bad the ink blots. How can I make a promise like that when I don't even know if I'll see the sun come up? But I have to. For her, I have to pretend just a little longer. I can't tell them what it's really like. I can't describe the mud that sucks at your boots like it's trying to pull you down into the earth itself. I can't tell them about the rats, fat and bold as brass, gnawing on things I don't even want to think about. I can't describe the sound a man makes when he's hit, not in the movie's way, but the real, wet, choking gasp that seems to go on forever. I can't write about the boy from Hamburg, couldn't have been more than 17, who caught a piece of shrapnel right next to me last week. He kept calling for his mother until his voice just faded away. No, you leave that out. You talk about the camaraderie, the jokes we share, the bad food. You make it sound like a rough camping trip. You spare them. That's the last gift you can give them. But then my pen stops, because there's more. There are things I can't tell them, but I need to confess them somewhere to someone, even if it's just to this damp piece of paper that will probably never be sent. I'm so scared. Not of dying, maybe, but of dying alone out here, in this foreign dirt, so far from home. Of my body being just another nameless thing left to rot in a field. The thought of it makes my stomach clench. And the guilt, that's a heavier weight than any pack I've ever carried. You do things out here to survive. Things you never thought you were capable of. There was a time in a village a few months back, it's all a blur now, but we were clearing houses. It was chaos, gunfire everywhere. I saw a shadow move in a doorway and I fired. I didn't think, I just fired. It was just a kid, a boy maybe 12, holding a piece of wood that looked like a rifle from the corner of my eye. He didn't make a sound, just fell. I can still see his face. I see it every night. I never told anyone. What would I say? We were all scared. We all did things. But that doesn't wash the blood off your hands. It doesn't stop the dreams. So I write it down here, a secret confession to this page. I write, forgive me for what I've become. The boy you sent away, the one who loved poetry and wanted to be a teacher, he's gone. This man who is left, this soldier with dirt under his nails and ghosts in his eyes, he's not the son you remember. I'm sorry for that. Please remember me as I was, not as I am. The candle sputters and I jump. My heart is hammering against my ribs like it wants out. The quiet is starting to break. Far away, but getting closer, I can hear the low rumble of our artillery warming up. It's a sound that starts in your feet and climbs right up your spine. It's the sound of the end. Time's up. I don't have any grand closing words. There's no poetry left in me. I just scrawl. I love you all. Think of me sometimes. And that's it. The ink is smeared from a drop of rain or maybe something else. I fold the letter, a clumsy, thick fold, and I don't even have an envelope. It doesn't matter. I tuck it into the inside pocket of my tunic, right next to the photograph. The photograph is faded and creased, but it's my treasure. It's all of us from a summer day at the lake. I'm squinting in the sun. Liesel is laughing, hanging off my arm, and Mutty and Vatty are smiling behind us. We all look so young, so untouched. I touch the edge of the paper, feeling the worn surface. That's the last thought I have. A stupid, simple one, as the first shells start to scream overhead and Sergeant Weber starts yelling for us to get ready. I think this piece of paper, this unfinished letter, and this faded picture, that might be all that ever makes it back home. It might be the only part of me that survives this place. And then the world explodes. The noise is unimaginable, a physical force that punches the air from your lungs. The ground heaves. Dirt and stone rain down on us. The candle is snuffed out instantly. There's no more time for thinking, no more time for fear. It's just movement and noise and the desperate, animal will to live for one more second. You stop being a man with thoughts and regrets. You become a machine, loading, aiming, firing. You do it for the man next to you, for Klaus who's screaming curses as he mans the MG-34, for the simple, primal reason that you don't want to die. But in the split second between reloads, in the deafening silence that follows a nearby explosion, your hand goes to your chest, to the lump in your pocket. You feel the paper crinkle, and for a fleeting moment you're not in this hell. You're back at that lake, you can feel the sun on your face, you can hear Liesel's laugh. And then a whistle screams, getting louder and louder, and you know it's coming right for you. You look up, and all you see is the sky turning to fire. The morphine's starting to wear off now, just a dull ache blooming deep in my side where the shrapnel went in, a hot, sharp burn that settled into something heavier, something that feels final. Funny, it's quieter now than it's been in days. The shelling has moved off, a distant thunder somewhere to the east, and the frantic shouting has died down to just the moaning of the wind through these shattered pines. It's just me and this cold Russian dirt, and this little book I'm scribbling in by the last sliver of light. I don't even know why I'm doing this. Habit, I suppose. Or maybe just the need to tell someone, anyone, what it was really like here at the end. It wasn't about flags or fatherlands. It was about the mud and the blood and the faces. Always the faces. It started a few days ago, this feeling of the walls closing in. The front had been fluid for weeks, a messy, bloody mess of advances and retreats, but then the reports started coming in of breakthroughs, of encirclement. The word itself, eingekesselt, it has a certain sound to it, doesn't it? Sounds almost neat, like a package tied up with string. There's nothing neat about it. It's the creeping dread that every road out is now a road in for them. It's the look in the eyes of the officers, a flicker of panic they try to hide behind a stiff upper lip. And for me, Carl, the medic, it meant one thing above all else. The tide of wounded was about to become a flood. And it did. Oh God, it did. They started bringing them in not in ones or twos, but in ragged groups, men leaning on each other, men carried on doors torn from ruined isbas, men dragged in on ground sheets, leaving smears of crimson in the snow. Our aid station was just a dugout in the side of a hill, reinforced with some logs, a red cross painted sloppily on a piece of canvas that kept getting blown off. It was never meant to handle this. The air inside quickly thickened into a fog, a horrible mixture of cigarette smoke, the sharp, clean scent of antiseptiquin we still had eaten, the coppery, sweet smell of blood. And underneath it all, the smell of fear, a sour, pungent odor that comes from men who know their bodies are broken. The cries, you never get used to the cries. Not the loud, screaming ones, those you can deal with, That's a man still fighting. It's the low, guttural moans, the ones that sound like an animal caught in a trap, the whispered pleas for mutter. That's what stays with you. My hands, they were never clean. There was always a sticky film on them, no matter how many times I wiped them on my already crusted tunic. It got into the cracks of my knuckles, under my nails, a dark, rust-colored stain that felt like it was seeping right into me. You have to make choices out here. That's the part they never tell you. It's not just about fixing people. It's about playing guard with a flashlight in a dirt hole. Triage. It's a fancy French word for a hellish practice. You walk among them, lying shoulder to shoulder on the cold ground, and you have to decide. This one with the belly wound, he's gone. You can see it in his eyes, a glassy, distant look. You give him a shot of morphine, a gentle pat on the shoulder, and you move on. You have to. This one over here, a young kid, his leg is a mess, but the bleeding. You can maybe stop the bleeding. You work on him. And all the while, you feel the eyes of the ones you've passed over on your back. They know, they always know. You hear a whimper, sanitator, bit, hilf, and you have to clench your jaw and pretend you don't hear, because if you stop for everyone, you save no one. The weight of that decision, Carl, it sits on your chest like a block of granite. Each man you leave is a failure you carry with you. You whisper an apology into the din, but the words are swallowed by the moans and the distant crump of artillery. It's the silence that's the worst, sometimes. You'll be working on a man, his breathing ragged, and then it just stops. The sudden absence of sound is louder than any explosion, and you're left there kneeling, your bloody hands hovering over a chest that no longer rises, and the silence screams at you. You try not to look at their faces, you really do. You try to see them as wounds, as cases, as anything but people, but they break through. Their faces, they're all I see when I close my eyes. There was this boy, couldn't have been more than 18, fresh-faced, like he'd just walked out of the Hitler Youth and into this nightmare. A piece of shrapnel had taken his arm off clean at the shoulder. I was trying to get a tourniquet on it, my hands slipping on the blood, and he looked up at me, his eyes wide with a childlike terror. He wasn't seeing me, not really. He was seeing something else. "Sanitator," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm from Hamburg. Do you think I'll see my mother again? What do you say to that? What possible words exist in any language that can answer that question in a place like this?" I just tightened the strap, told him to be still, that he was going to be fine. A lie. A necessary, cruel lie. I hope he believed it. Then there was the old sergeant, a guy they called Der Alt, though he was probably only 40. A tough old bird who'd been through France and the deserts of Africa. A mortar round had landed too close. Internal injuries, the worst kind. There was nothing I could do but sit with him, hold his hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. He wasn't looking at the dirt ceiling of the dugout. He was looking through it, back across a continent. He started talking, not about the war, but about his farm. His voice was soft, dreamy. He described the smell of the earth after a spring rain, the way his wife's laugh sounded across the yard, the weight of a newborn lamb in his arms. He spoke of the cherry trees in bloom and the simple, profound peace of a day's work done. And then his grip loosened and he was gone, just like that. He died thinking of his farm, not this frozen hell. In a strange way, I envied him. We were running out of everything. It started with the small things first. The proper bandages were long gone. We were tearing up whatever we could find, shirts from the dead, strips from blankets that were too thin to provide any real warmth. The antiseptic was a memory. We were cleaning wounds with vodka we'd scavenged from an abandoned village when we were lucky enough to find any. The morphine, we saved the last few syrettes for the worst cases. The crushing weight of failure became a physical thing. Every time a man's breathing shallowed out and stopped, it was like another stone added to a pile on my back. You look at your empty bag, at the torn cloth and the useless instruments, and you feel like a fraud, a medic who can't medic, a healer in a place that only deals in death. I found myself whispering apologies to the men I had to leave in the corner, the ones whose tags I'd collected. "I'm sorry, camarade. I'm so sorry." It was all I had left to give. The darkness outside wasn't just the night. It was the feeling of being completely and utterly swallowed. The Russians were tightening the noose, and we were the mice in the trap. The sounds of their machine guns were getting closer, a dry, chattering rhythm that was punctuated by the deeper thud of their mortars. Our own artillery had fallen silent hours ago. They'd either pulled back or been overrun. We were on our own. That's when the order came, or what passed for an order. It was just a lieutenant, his face blackened with dirt. his uniform torn. "Everyone who can walk, we're breaking out. Now." It was chaos. The walking wounded stumbled to their feet, grabbing rifles, their eyes wide with a desperate hope. I looked around at the men who couldn't move, the ones I'd been tending to. Their eyes met mine, and in them I saw a silent understanding. There was no anger, just a profound, heartbreaking resignation. One of them, a corporal with a shattered leg, managed a weak smile. "Go on, Doc," he croaked. "Tell them back home we held the line." I wanted to scream, to argue, to stay. But what good would I be? A dead medic saves no one. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I turned my back on them. I picked up my bag, now almost empty, and joined the ragged line of men shuffling out into the freezing night. The guilt was a cold stone in my gut, heavier than any pack. We moved like ghosts through the skeletal remains of a birch forest, the moon casting long, twisted shadows. Every twig snap sounded like a rifle shot. We were maybe 100 meters from the dugout when the world exploded. A flare went up, bathing everything in an eerie white light. Then the mortars started falling. It wasn't aimed fire. It was a saturation, a hailstorm of iron and fire. The concussions knocked the air from my lungs. I hit the dirt, pressing my face into the frozen mud, the taste of soil and blood in my mouth. Men were shouting, screaming, but the sounds were muffled, distant, like listening through water. I saw a man next to me simply disintegrate. One moment he was there, the next, a red mist. I felt a hot, sharp punch in my side, like someone had driven a red-hot poker into me. It wasn't a loud pain at first, just a sudden, shocking intrusion. Then the dizziness hit me, a wave of nausea and weakness that made the world tilt on its axis. I stumbled, fell behind a fallen tree. I could hear the shouts fading, the sound of boots crunching on snow moving away. They had to keep going. Stopping was death. I tried to call out, but only a weak gurgle came out. I was alone. I managed to crawl a little further, into a shallow depression behind the log. The pain was really setting in now, a deep, throbbing burn that pulsed with every heartbeat. I fumbled with my tunic, my fingers clumsy and cold. The shrapnel had torn through the cloth and into me. It wasn't a gushing wound, but a deep, ugly tear. I knew what that meant. Gut shot. In this cold, with no supplies, it was just a matter of time. I got my field dressing out, the last one I had, and pressed it against the wound, the white gauze turning red instantly. It was a pointless gesture, but you do it anyway. It's what you're trained to do. Then I just lay there, listening. The shooting was moving away. The breakout had failed, or maybe some of them made it. I hope some of them made it. That's when I thought of my own brother, Friedrich. He's out here somewhere, too, on another part of this damned Eastern Front. A grenadier, always the tough one. I remember our last leave, sitting in a beer garden in Munich, the sun on our faces. He was boasting about the girls he'd meet in Moscow, and I was teasing him, telling him he'd probably trip over his own feet. We were just boys then. Now I don't know what we are, and I thought of my promise to Muddy. I promised her I'd look out for him. A stupid promise, really. How do you look out for anyone in this? It's every man for himself, a chaos of steel and fire. But lying here, feeling the cold seep into my bones, I felt a desperate hope. Not for myself. I know my number up. But for him, I hope that if he's lying in some frozen field like this, hurt and scared, that someone finds him, that a medic, maybe one of theirs, a Russian, I don't care, finds him. That someone shows him a moment of kindness, a sip of water, a gesture of humanity in all this madness. That's my final prayer. That somewhere, someone keeps the promise I couldn't. I'm getting tired now. The cold doesn't feel so bad anymore. It's almost comfortable, like slipping into a warm bath. I can't feel my fingers. I managed to get the photo out of my breast pocket. It's a little stained at the corner, but I can still see them clearly. Muddy Vatty, my little sister Liesel, and me and Friedrich, standing tall and proud in our uniforms, looking like we own the world. We knew nothing, absolutely nothing. I look at their faces, at the smiles that haven't yet been wiped away by telegrams and silence, and I try to pour all my love into that look. I hope they know I tried. I really tried to be a good medic, a good son, a good brother. I hope they remember me not like this, covered in blood and dirt, but as that boy in the photo, full of a future that never came to be. The wind is picking up, whistling through the trees. It sounds like Liesel singing that little folk song she loved. Maybe it's just the morphine, or maybe it's a gift, a final kindness. I'm just going to close my eyes for a minute, just for a minute. It's so quiet now, so very quiet. The leather of my rifle sling is worn smooth as silk. That's how many times I've run my thumb over it. It's a habit, see, like a nervous tick. This morning, with a damp rag and a little can of oil that's nearly empty, I cleaned my carabiner for what I know is the last time. It's pointless, really. The thing is spotless. The bolt action slides back and forth with a sound like a whisper, a well-oiled whisper of death. But there's a comfort in the ritual, in the smell of the oil and the cold, hard feel of the steel in my hands. It's something I can control in a world where I control nothing. Outside the dugout, the world is a mess of churned-up earth and the skeletal remains of trees, all silhouetted against a sky the color of dirty slate. The mud, it's always the mud. It gets in your boots, your food, your soul. It has a smell, this place, a thick soup of wet earth, cordite, rot, and something else, something metallic and sweet that you never get used to. You just learn to breathe shallow. Hans, the new kid from Hamburg, he offered me a cigarette earlier. American, a lucky strike he'd taken off a body. I shook my head. "You keep it, kid," I told him. But he insisted, his hand shaking just a little. He's maybe 18, with that fresh-faced look that hasn't been scrubbed away by the filth yet. It reminds me of me, back in 41, full of fire and stupid ideas about glory. Now the fire's just embers, and glory is a word for fools and politicians. So I took it, and we shared it, passing it back and forth in silence, the smoke a welcome warmth in my lungs, cutting through the damp chill. I watched him as he tried to act brave, checking his ammunition over and over, his movements jerky. The other veterans, the few of us left from the old company, we just sit. We don't talk much. We save our breath. We watch the new replacements with a kind of sad pity, because we can see their future written in the mud and the mist, and it's the same as the future of the boys who were here last month and the month before that. They don't know the dance yet, but we do. We know all the steps. My mind keeps drifting back, not to the big battles, but to the small things. This morning, for a second, I heard a lark singing somewhere beyond the shell craters. It was a crazy, brave little sound. And it took me right back to the farm. Not to a special day, just an ordinary one, a morning before all this. I was up before the sun, the grass wet with dew, soaking through my boots. The air was clean, smelling of hay and the damp earth of the fields, a good smell, a living smell. I was carrying 2 buckets of water from the well for my mother, the weight straining my shoulders. I could hear the soft lowing of the cows in the barn, waiting to be milked. The sky was turning from purple to a soft, gentle pink, and the only sound was the crunch of my footsteps and the distant church bell. That's a memory you can taste, you can feel. It's real, more real than this nightmare. There was a girl, Elsa, with hair the color of wheat and a laugh that could make you forget your troubles. I remember standing with her by the fence after church one Sunday, the sun warm on our faces. I was shipping out in a week. I was full of it then, talking about seeing Paris, about coming back a hero. She just looked at me with those serious eyes of hers and said, "Just come back, Erich, that's all." I promised I'd write. I had every intention of writing. I carried her small, folded photograph in my breast pocket for months. But after the first winter in Russia, after you've seen things no man should see, what do you write? "Dear Elsa, today I watched my best friend freeze to death. The soup was cold. Hope all is well." The words dried up. The photograph got soft and blurry from sweat and rain until her face was just a smudge. I lost it somewhere outside of Kursk. I sometimes wonder if she ever married, if she ever thinks of the boy who promised to write. That's the thing they don't tell you. It's not the big battles that break you, it's the erosion, like a river stone worn smooth. It's the sound of birds. Back home, it meant spring or morning or just life going on. Here, when the birds start singing, it means the shelling has stopped. It means it's quiet enough for you to hear them, and that usually means something bad is coming. It means the storm is gathering. You learn to hate the sound you once loved. I catch Muller's eye across the trench. He's an old hand from my village, even. We've been through it all together, from the heady days in France to the frozen hell outside Moscow, to this last, desperate stand in this God-forsaken forest. We don't need to speak. He gives me a look, a slow, deliberate nod, and his eyes say everything. Well, this is it, camarade. It's not fear in his eyes, not anymore. It's just a deep, bottomless weariness, a resignation. It's the look of a man balancing a ledger and knowing the numbers don't add up in his favor anymore. He's got a wife and a little boy back in Bavaria. He showed me a new drawing his son sent him just yesterday, a shaky crayon picture of a house and a son with a smiley face. We both knew when he tucked it carefully back into his tunic that it was the last one he'd ever get. That knowledge hangs between us, a heavy, unspoken truth. That's when I made my decision. I took out my soul butch, my paybook, and the little folded letter from my mother that I've carried since Christmas. The ink is smudged, but I can still make out her words. My dear son, we are praying for you. I also took out my watch. It's a good watch, a silver Junghans my father gave me when I finished school. It still ticks, a tiny, stubborn heartbeat against my palm. I walked over to Becker, a young kid from my squad who caught a piece of shrapnel in his leg yesterday. He's being evacuated back to a field hospital, lucky bastard. Becker, I said, my voice rough. When you get back, could you see that these get sent to my family? He looked at the things in my hand, then up at my face. His own face was pale with pain, but understanding dawned in his eyes. He didn't say, "You'll do it yourself," or any of that hollow crap. He just nodded, a quick, sharp movement, and took them, stuffing them into his own pack. "I will, Sergeant, I promise." That was it, a transaction, the passing of a burden. It felt good in a strange way, like tying up a loose end. There's a strange calm that settles over you when you finally accept it. The jangling nerves, the knot in your stomach, it all just goes quiet. It's like standing in the eye of a hurricane. All around you is chaos, but inside there's a stillness. I'm not a particularly religious man, not anymore. The things I've seen have made it hard to believe in a benevolent God. But I found myself whispering a prayer anyway, not for victory, not for the fatherland. What does that even mean out here? It's just words. I prayed for it to be quick. I prayed that my mother wouldn't have to wonder for too long. And I prayed that someone, someday, might remember that I was once a farmer's son who loved the sunrise, and not just a number on a casualty list. The lieutenant's whistle is the worst sound in the world. It's a shrill, teeth-jarring screech that cuts through everything. That's when the fear comes back, but it's a cold fear, a numb fear. It's not the hot, panicky fear of a green soldier. It's the icy dread of a man walking the last few steps to the gallows. You know the routine. You've done it a dozen times. Check your weapon. Make sure your helmet strap is tight. One last look at the faces of the men beside you. Mueller is on my left, his jaw set, his knuckles white on his rifle. Hans is on my right, breathing in short, ragged gasps, his eyes wide with terror. I want to say something to him, something wise or comforting, but there are no words. I just clap him on the shoulder, a hard, solid thump. It's all I can do. The lieutenant shouts the order, his voice cracking with a tension he's trying to hide. Off heraus, vorwärts. Up, out, forward. And then we're going over the top. It's not a run, not at first. It's a clumsy, stumbling climb out of the trench, your boots slipping in the mud, your body heavy and slow, like you're moving through water. Then the world explodes. The machine guns open up, that familiar ripping cloth sound, and the air is suddenly full of buzzing hornets seeking flesh. The artillery joins in, the crump of shells landing, the concussions hitting you in the chest, throwing dirt and rock and things you don't want to think about into the air. You run because there's nothing else to do. You run towards the smoke, towards the noise, towards the death that you know is waiting. And in that chaos, in that final, roaring madness, your mind does a funny thing. It doesn't think of God or country. It doesn't think of heroism. My last thought, as I ran towards the tree line, the tracers cutting green lines through the gloom, wasn't of the girl or my mother or even the war. It was of the simple, physical weight of a bucket of well water in each hand, the cool morning air on my face, and the feeling of walking back towards a warm kitchen where the smell of fresh bread was waiting. It was the thought of a quiet life, a small life, a life that was already a lifetime ago. And then there was only the noise. The world ended today. I don't mean that in the way the preachers back home talk about, with fire and brimstone and angels blowing trumpets. This was different. This was the earth itself deciding it had had enough of us, of our war, and it was just going to shake us all off like a dog shaking off fleas. It started not with a bang, but with a sound I'd never heard before, a kind of low moan that came from everywhere at once, from the sky and the ground and the air in my lungs. And then it built into this roaring, this screaming that wasn't a sound anymore but a physical thing, a wall of pressure that hit you in the chest and shoved you down into the dirt. There was no time to think, no time to pray, no time for anything but the animal instinct to get small, to disappear. I pressed my face into the mud of the crater we were in, Fritz and me and little Klaus, who couldn't have been more than 18, And I remember wishing, actually wishing, that I could just sink into it, that the earth would open up and swallow me whole. It would have been a mercy compared to what was happening above. Each shell landing wasn't just a noise, it was a convulsion. The ground would jump and heave like a living thing, and you'd feel it in your bones, a deep, sickening thud that rattled your teeth and stole the air right out of your lungs. You'd gasp, and there'd be nothing but thick, gritty smoke, and the smell of cordite and something else, something sweet and rotten that I've come to know is the smell of high explosives mixing with the soil. You stop being a man. You're just a bag of nerves and fear, clinging to the mud, and each new impact is a fresh wave of terror, a certainty that this is the one that has your name on it. Fritz was next to me, and I could feel him shaking, or maybe it was me shaking him, and he kept shouting something, but I couldn't hear a word. The roar was just too absolute. It was like being inside a giant bell that was being struck over and over again. You stop hearing the individual explosions. It all just merges into one continuous, world-shattering noise that fills your skull until there's no room for anything else. Not a memory of home, not a thought of your mother's face, nothing. Just the noise and the shaking and the desperate, clawing hope that it stops. Please God, just let it stop. And then it did stop. Not all at once, but the explosions moved away, the roar receded like a terrible tide going out, and what was left behind was nothing. A silence so complete it was louder than the bombardment. It was a high-pitched ringing, a whine that seemed to be coming from inside my own head, and underneath that, this awful, heavy, suffocating quiet. I lay there for I don't know how long, my whole body vibrating, my ears screaming their protest. I tried to move, and it was like pushing through water. Every muscle ached. I pushed myself up, my hands sinking into the churned, wet earth, and I looked around, and nothing was familiar. The little copse of trees we'd been using as a landmark was just a collection of splintered stumps. The trench line we'd spent 2 days digging was gone, just a series of raw, ugly scars on the landscape. Everything was grey, the sky was grey with smoke and dust, the ground was grey mud, even the air was grey. It was like someone had taken the world I knew this morning and wiped it away with a dirty rag. I coughed, and the sound was tiny and pathetic in that immense silence. Fritz. I called out, but my voice sounded strange, muffled and distant, like it was coming from someone else. Klaus, Müller, is anyone there? I shouted the names of the men I'd been sharing a cigarette with not an hour ago. For a long moment there was nothing but that damned ringing. Then from off to my left I heard a weak, cracked voice. Here, over here. It was so faint, it could have been the wind. I stumbled towards the sound, my boots sucking in the mud with every step, my legs feeling like rubber. I tripped over something soft and heavy and didn't dare look down. I just kept moving towards that voice. It was the only thing that felt real in that whole nightmare. I found him behind what was left of a fallen log. It was young Klaus. His face was pale under the grime, and his eyes were wide with a terror I knew was mirrored in my own. My ears, he mumbled. I can't hear anything, just a buzzing. I helped him sit up, and that's when I saw the landscape properly. This was no longer a battlefield. It was a slaughterhouse. The artillery had churned the earth so thoroughly that it had unearthed things that should have stayed buried. I saw things no man should ever see. I won't describe them, not in detail, because some memories you try to bury deep and hope they never surface again. Let's just say the ground was littered with more than just splintered wood and torn-up equipment. The smell was the worst part. That coppery smell of blood, mixed with the stench of opened earth and the lingering, bitter tang of explosives. It was a smell that clung to the back of your throat, that you could taste for days afterwards. I saw a boot with the foot still in it, standing upright and absurdly neat amidst the chaos. I saw a scattered pack of letters, the paper already turning to pulp in the mud, some poor mother's words lost forever. And then I saw it, lying next to a crater's edge. Fritz's helmet. The one with the little dent on the side from that time, a piece of shrapnel ricocheted off it back near Kharkov, the one that probably saved his life. I picked it up. It was cold and wet. My first thought, my stupid, hopeful thought, was that it had just been knocked off his head in the blast. Maybe he was lying somewhere nearby, cursing up a storm, complaining about losing his good helmet. That's the thing you do, you see. You clutch at any little straw, any tiny shred of normalcy. You tell yourself, oh, he just lost his helmet, he's fine, he's probably looking for it right now. But then the reality of it all started to sink in, slow and cold and heavy as the mud seeping into my boots. The voices that answered my calls were so few and so weak. Where was Sergeant Muller with his gravelly voice and his endless supply of bad jokes? Where was Old Man Schmidt, who could fix anything with a piece of wire and a prayer? I called their names again, my voice getting stronger, more desperate. Muller, Schmidt, Hans, answer me, damn it. But the only answers were the faint moans from other craters, other pockets of survivors. The unit I had known this morning, the men I had eaten breakfast with, the men I had joked with about the girls we'd meet after the war, that unit was gone. It just didn't exist anymore. It had been wiped off the map as completely as those trees had been. We weren't a fighting unit anymore. We were just a handful of scared, broken men scattered across a field of death. That's when the real fear set in, a different kind of fear than the sheer animal terror of the bombardment. This was a cold, creeping dread. The instinct to survive was screaming at me to move, to find cover, to get to what was left of our lines, because the Russians would be coming soon. They always did after a barrage. They'd be swarming over this ground like ants, and if you were still here, you were dead or worse, captured. But another part of me, a bigger part, just wanted to lie down, to curl up right there in the mud next to Klaus and just go to sleep. The exhaustion was a physical weight, heavier than my pack had ever been. It was a deep, soul-crushing tiredness that made every movement feel like a monumental effort. Why bother? A voice in my head whispered. Why run? What's the point? You'll just end up like Fritz, or like the things you saw scattered among the trees. The thought of seeing my family again, which had always been my beacon, felt like a dim, distant dream. It didn't seem real anymore. Nothing from before the barrage seemed real. The only reality was this grey, ruined landscape and the ringing in my ears. And then the question came, the one that haunts every soldier who makes it through when his buddies don't. Why me? Why did that shell land 10 meters away and not right on top of me? Why did I live when Fritz, who had a wife and a new baby girl waiting for him in Dresden, why did he have to die? There's no reason to it, no sense. It's just blind, stupid, random chance, a lottery of death. 1 minute you're joking with your friends, the next you're just gone. And the ones left behind have to carry that question with them for the rest of their lives. I looked at Klaus, who was shivering now, shock setting in, and I knew I had to be the older one. I had to be the one to move. The survival instinct won out, but it felt like a hollow victory. I got Klaus to his feet, slinging his arm over my shoulder. He was light, too light, just a kid. Come on, Klaus, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. We can't stay here. We need to find the others. We started to walk, stumbling through the morass, heading in what I hoped was the general direction of our rear lines. We passed a few other survivors, men from other units, their faces blank with the same shock. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. We just joined this sad, silent procession of the living, walking through a world of the dead. Later, when we'd found a semblance of a line, a hastily dug foxhole manned by a lieutenant I didn't know, and a handful of boys who looked even younger than Klaus, I finally had a moment to myself. The shaking started then, a fine tremor that began in my hands and worked its way through my whole body. I fumbled in my tunic pocket, my fingers numb and clumsy, and pulled out my diary. The small, leather-bound book my sister gave me, now stained with mud and something darker. My hands were still shaking so badly I could barely hold the pencil, but I had to write something. I had to put it down on paper to make it real, to prove that I was still here, that I had witnessed it. The words came out in a messy, scrawled hand, a testament to the randomness of it all. I didn't write about strategy or glory or the fatherland. I wrote about the noise. I wrote about the silence that followed. I wrote about Fritz's helmet. And I wrote the question that I knew would never have an answer. Why was I spared? Then I closed the book, tucked it back inside my tunic, next to my heart, and looked out at the coming dusk. The war wasn't over. It was just waiting for tomorrow. And all I could do was try to survive until then, one breath at a time, carrying the weight of the silence with me. The damp in this foxhole gets into everything, right down to your bones. It's a cold you can't shake, a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. You sit there, knee-deep in muck, listening to the distant crump of artillery, a sound as regular as a heartbeat out here, and you try to remember what it felt like to be dry, to be warm, to be clean. But those memories are getting fuzzy around the edges, like an old photograph left in the rain. Right now, all that feels real is the cold steel of this rifle in my hands and the weight of Klaus's watch in my tunic pocket, right here, next to my heart. It's a heavy little thing for its size, a solid silver pocket watch on a chain, and I feel its weight with every breath I take. It's not my weight to carry, but it's mine now. He made sure of that. It was just last week, or maybe it was a month. Agatime gets funny out here. It stretches and contracts like a bad dream. We were in a hole much like this one. The rain had finally let up, leaving behind that thick, sweet answer smell of churned earth, cordite, and something else, something rotten that always seemed to hang in the air. We were passing a canteen back and forth, not saying much, just two tired men trying to steal a moment of quiet. Then Klaus, he got that look in his eyes, the one he'd get when he was thinking of home, a faraway softness that was so out of place in all this grimness. He fumbled inside his tunic, past the grimy layers of wool and dirt, and pulled it out. The watch. Even in the grey, murky light, it gleamed. "From my father," he said, his voice a low rumble. He wasn't a big talker, Klaus, so when he spoke, you listened. He clicked it open with a thumbnail. The face was pristine white enamel with bold black numbers, and inside the lid was an engraving, Für meinen Sohn, immer in der Zeit, for my son, always on time. He'd shown me before, but he always handled it with a kind of reverence, like it was a holy relic. He gave it to me the day I left for the front, Klaus said, snapping it shut. Said it had kept him safe in the last war. He let out a short, harsh laugh, a sound without any humor in it. Did a damn fine job, didn't it? He held it in his palm for a long moment, just looking at it. Then he turned to me, and his face was dead serious. "Ernst," he said, using my name, which he almost never did. It was usually just "Hey, you," or some crude nickname. "Ernst, if anything happens, I need you to get this back to Elsa. In Leipzig, you remember the address?" I nodded. I'd heard him talk about Elsa and their little apartment near the park so many times I could picture it perfectly. The way the light came through the kitchen window in the morning, the sound of the tram bells from the street below. "Get this to her. That's all. Just get it to her." I started to brush it off the way you do, told him to shut up with that kind of talk, that we'd both be drinking schnapps at his kitchen table before the snow fell. But he just pressed the watch into my hand. It was still warm from his skin. "Promise me," he said, and his eyes were pleading. "Promise me you'll do this." So I promised. What else could I do? Then, typical Klaus, he had to lighten the mood. A grim smile touched his lips. "Lucky bastard," he grunted. "If I buy it, you get to go home to my beautiful wife. If you buy it, I have to go tell your sour-fist mother in Frankfurt." We both chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. It was our little joke, our bit of gallows humor to keep the darkness at bay. Who would have the easier job? We both knew the answer. Neither of us had an easy job ahead. I wish I could remember what we were talking about right before it happened. That's the thing that haunts me. It was something stupid, utterly meaningless. I think it was about the lousy bean soup we'd had for lunch, how it tasted more of mud than of beans. Or maybe it was about a football match we'd listened to on the radio back in 41. Nothing important. Nothing worth being the last words you ever say to your best friend. We were walking along a supply trench, single file, heading back to the forward observation post. The sky was a dirty blanket of grey cloud. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that sets your teeth on edge because you know it can't last. Klaus was a few steps ahead of me, his helmet tilted back on his head, his shoulders slumped with that weariness we all carried like a second pack. He turned his head slightly, saying something over his shoulder, a half-formed sentence I never quite heard. Then the world ended. There was no whistle, no warning, just a deafening crump that hit you in the chest before it hit your ears. The air turned to fire and thunder. I was thrown backwards, my head cracking against the mud wall of the trench. For a second there was nothing but ringing silence and a shower of dirt and debris raining down on me. My ears were screaming. I pushed myself up, spitting out mud, my head spinning. The world had gone blurry, and then I saw him. Klaus was lying face down in the mud about 10 feet away, just lying there. "Klaus," I croaked, my voice not sounding like my own. I scrambled over to him, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape. "Klaus, you all right? Talk to me, you lazy ox." I rolled him over. His eyes were open, staring up at the grey sky, but they weren't seeing anything. There was no blood, no obvious wound, just a fine trickle of red from his nose. It must have been the concussive force. It just stopped him. "No, no, no." I muttered, grabbing the front of his tunic, giving him a shake. Come on, Klaus, not like this. I fumbled for his wrist, pressing my fingers against it, searching for a pulse, for any sign of life. My own hands were trembling so badly I could barely feel anything. I pressed harder, waiting, praying for that faint, rhythmic throb. Nothing, just a cold, still silence under my fingertips. The denial was a physical force. This couldn't be real. We were just talking about bean soup. We were just joking about going home. This was a mistake. But the longer I knelt there, the colder his skin felt, the more the truth settled over me, heavy and suffocating, like being buried alive. And then it hit me, worse than the mortar blast. The promise. The weight of it crashed down on me in that instant, a ton of bricks right on my chest. It was no longer a vague, abstract thing we joked about in a foxhole. It was real. The promise was alive, and Klaus was dead, and the responsibility was now mine alone. I remember a sound escaping my throat, a kind of strangled sob mixed with a curse. I think I punched the mud next to his head once, twice, a useless, furious gesture against the utter futility of it all. The others came then, shouting, pulling me back, checking him themselves. There were muttered words, a shake of the head. It was done. In the hurried, brutal efficiency of war, someone went through his pockets, taking his paybook, his identification tags. But I remembered. As they were preparing to move his body, I knelt down beside him one last time. I whispered an apology to him, though I don't know what for. For living, for not being the one hit, I don't know. Then I reached into his tunic pocket. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the watch. I pulled it out, the chain slinking after it like a silver snake. I clenched it in my fist so hard the edges dug into my palm. Then I stood up, and without looking back, I walked away. I found a scrap of relatively clean cloth, an old rag from my pack, and I wrapped the watch in it, a clumsy, careful shroud. I tucked it into the inner pocket of my tunic, the one right over my heart. I buttoned the flap shut, and I felt it. Immediately I felt its weight. It wasn't just the physical weight of the silver. It was the weight of his life, his hopes, his love for Elsa, his father's pride, the entire world he'd left behind. It was all contained in that small, cold object, and I was now its keeper. From that moment on, I carried him with me. Every step I took, through the sucking mud of the fields, along the shattered tree lines of the forests, I felt the watch bump gently against my chest. It was a constant, ticking reminder. In the chaos of a firefight, when the fear was a sharp, metallic taste in my mouth and my hands were slick with sweat on my rifle, I'd feel for it through the coarse wool of my uniform, a solid point of reality in the madness. It grounded me. At night, when the cold seeped into the foxhole and the darkness was filled with the moans of the wounded and the far-off chatter of machine guns, I'd take it out sometimes. I wouldn't open it. I'd just hold it in my hand, letting it grow warm from my skin. And I'd talk to him. In my mind, I'd have these conversations. I'm still here, Klaus. I'm still trying. That was a close one today, you old bastard. You'd have laughed. Or on the really bad days, the days when the hunger was a sharp pain in my gut and the hopelessness felt like a physical weight greater than any pack. I don't know if I can do this. I'm so tired. But the promise always pulled me back. I won't fail you, I'd think, my jaw tightening. I swore I wouldn't, and I won't. The watch became my talisman, my reason. My own survival, which had once been a desperate primal instinct, now had a purpose. It wasn't about the fatherland anymore, or glory, or any of the nonsense they'd fed us. Those ideas had died in the mud along with Klaus. This was simpler. This was personal. I had to live because I had to get that watch to a woman in Leipzig. That was my war aim. That was the entire sum of my duty, which brings me to now. Sitting here in this hole, with the light fading and the cold getting deeper. I've got this little notebook. The pages are damp and curled at the edges, but the pencil still works. I'm writing down the address. Elsa Fischer. Number 14, Rosenthalgasse, Leipzig. I'm writing it on this page, and I'm writing it on a separate scrap of paper that I'm going to fold up and put in the watch's pouch. I'm making sure it survives. Maybe someone will find this notebook on me. Maybe they'll find the watch. But the address needs to be there. It's the key to the whole thing. It's the destination. Without it, the watch is just a piece of metal. With it, it's a life, a memory, a love story interrupted. So I write it carefully, making the letters clear and legible. This is my final entry, I think. We're moving up again soon, into a real meat grinder from the sound of it. The Russians have been pounding that line for days. I can feel the watch against my chest, a steady, reassuring pressure. It's funny, before this I was just scared, terrified all the time. Now I'm still scared, sure. Anyone who says they aren't is a liar or a fool, but it's a different kind of fear. It's mixed with this determination, this ironclad resolve. I made a vow to my friend, and I will see it through. I will walk through hell itself to get this watch home. For Klaus, for Elsa, for the memory of a man who joked about being soup seconds before he died. My survival is no longer just about me. It's about keeping a promise made in the mud, and that somehow makes the weight a little easier to bear. It's a good weight, a human weight, the weight of a comrade's watch.